Welcome to Open Mic from Modalis Infrastructure Partners, where aviation talks and the world listens. From global airport and aviation developments to disruptive technology, airport investment, and much more, we unpack the trends, technologies, challenges, and opportunities shaping the global aviation industry. Now here's your host, Curtis Grad.
I'm very pleased to introduce today's guest, Craig Richmond, best known here on the west coast of Canada as past president and CEO of Vancouver Airport Authority. In addition to a range of other pursuits, which we'll get into in a bit, he's currently sitting on the board of Calgary Airport Authority and serves as a strategic advisor to the board for security guard. Craig, many thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And we'll start with where things kicked off with you in YVR, with your airport career. You were leading that airport operations as VP of Ops for, I guess, roughly 7 years. And then you got the call to look at a project abroad. But the interesting thing was 7 years later, you find yourself back in Vancouver as president and CEO. They say you can never look back, but that's exactly what you did. So I'm very interested to hear what kind of adjustment you had coming back and what it was like to sit back in the big chair.
Oh, that's a very good question. Thank you. I would like to go back to about 2005, and I was asked to tour around the airport a group from Nassau in the Bahamas. And a good mutual friend of ours, Lori Chambers, and I were there, and we ended up in a boardroom, and they threw a little brochure across to us. They said, we're gonna, privatize the airport. And we both looked at each other and said, no way. And about a year later, George from Vantage came and said, do you want to go and be the CEO in the Bahamas? It wasn't that I wasn't enjoying Vancouver at all. As you said, I'd been there 11 years, 8 as the VP. But, the chance to be a CEO, new build of a new terminal, all that. So, yeah, that was great. That's what peeled me away. So here's an interesting thing that I think people don't realize. When you leave, you're too busy in your new role. Like, you didn't think of Abbotsford and Nanaimo when you were in Cyprus. You're busy, right? Like, so you don't sit there. But I went to various airports, and then in 3 years later, they said there's a competition. Do you want to put your hat in for Vancouver? So it actually wasn't 3 years later. It was 7 years later. 7 years later, and you go, I haven't even thought about Vancouver, except, friends and that kind of thing. So you feel at a bit of a disadvantage trying to get ready for the CEO competition overseas because, I don't know the org chart. I don't know anything. So it's not like you sit there and you think, I'm going back. It was a beautiful happenstance. In my family, we call it the fortunate event. And so you come back. And I remember coming back, and one of the very first days, I was on the Bill Good show in Vancouver, which dates me because that's no longer around. But he said, what did you think about coming back? And I said, when you come back to a place like Vancouver that already was winning Skytrax awards, you go, this is not a turnaround. This is not a place that needs a new terminal, needs new management, whatever. So you really I felt like, boy, how not to screw it up. It's like coming into a winning sports team.
Exactly.
So but then what you realize is there's always a new slant on things. You can always try and pick things up. And having worked in a variety of other airports and different cultures, I think it helped. I said, I just started asking questions. I said, okay, I think we can do that a little better. I think we can think about this. But it really was building on the shoulders of giants and all the people that had done great work before. So there were moments where there was new stuff, but as in most airports, I suspect, and with most cultures, you build on what's really working,
Yeah. And I think the interesting part is you said earlier, well, it's not the same org chart. Some of the same names may be in that org chart, but also I find that when you leave and you come back, your brain just kind of gets locked in what people were doing the 7 years before when you left. Well, those people have moved up, moved on, grown, and developed some skills along the way and some experience. And I'm sure you had a few experiences where people you didn't really know that well are suddenly in senior roles, right?
Oh yeah, and that's great. You want to see that movement. There were also people that could have had an entire career that came in after me and left before me, like 6 years there. And we worked at the same airport, but never at the same time. So, and I really think that the best organizations and the best airports, everybody should realize you're going to pass the baton. Every organization, right? You're going to be passing the baton. So you just run as fast as you can and as much as you can while you're there. And then when you have a great team, okay, now I think we can really do great things. I'll just tell one story. I walked around and I said, what are our values? And frankly, there were too many. And this is a common thing. I figure if you can't recite the values, if you can't recite the vision, then really
Mission.
they're just words. Exactly. So you really got to
It's a,
tighten them up.
it's a plaque. It's a plaque on the wall, right?
Yeah, but so we tightened them up till there was just four, and everybody started to really realize it. And then we used it for everything from promotions to bonuses to how you get marked, how you're doing against those four. And of course, within four, there's many subcategories, but there's no getting around safety and teamwork and accountability and innovation. Those were the four. And we just kept saying them and saying them, and then people, they could repeat them and they could live them. And I saw meetings where somebody said, that's not team play, and so that then that it's really working. And in customer service, right? So the toughest thing about customer service is that it's the same thing day in, day out. The number one question asked of our customer information counters and of our volunteers was, where's the nearest washroom? Because people come into this big building, they need to use a washroom and they don't know where. So
Exactly.
you, as a customer service person, you have to realize this is the 800,000th time I've answered this question, but it's the first time that person has asked it.
Yeah.
You have to continuously every day realize, like, learning from Disney, the show is new every day and it has to be the same for every person. When you get that going, and we had that in everybody, from cleaners to the RCMP to our police security, everybody, airlines that just want to pitch in and help, you can't lose. Honestly, at that point, you stand back and you go, we can't lose. And if you don't have that, you're never going to win. If you don't have that buy-in,
Well, and we've all had that flight attendant that's made that onboard announcement one too many times, and it sounds a little flat. And it's the same thing in the terminal. Now, you talked a little bit earlier about this aspect of passing the baton. And I've always been a firm believer that the first day that you're on the job, you have to start thinking about how you're preparing this organization for the day you leave, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years down the road. But I've always found that anybody that's too protective of their role when they go into it and isn't thinking about how they're going to leave it in a better condition than they found it and how they're going to prepare the organization for the future, you've kind of failed before you've started if you don't think in that sort of mindset. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when you go overseas and you're an expat, the whole focus and the goal is to turn it over to the country that you're there. It should be anyway. Many of the places that we went, and so that's probably what instilled it in me hugely. But also realizing that people move on. The airport industry is really, you can call it that now. In its nascent stages back in the 80s and 90s, it was more, there were boutique airports. Now it's a full industry, and full well with the way Modalis works, people move around and they're looking for new opportunities. And so the organization is going to change. And I try to tell people, the succession plan is great, but it's not going to stick. I've always believed in this, and I think it's Eisenhower's quote: "The plan is nothing. Planning is everything." Keep planning, but don't think that your succession plan is going to turn out the way that you think it will.
And it's not succession planning, it's succession options, because something's going to happen that if you've got a rock solid plan, it's going to crumble within the first 6 months because somebody's going to move on or somebody new is going to come on the horizon you hadn't thought of before that's going to be a better fit, or the circumstances change, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, but you should be continuously thinking about, is that person ready? Will they be ready in a couple of years? What do we need to do? I firmly believe also pushing people, saying, look, you should try this. Just, I know you're not from ops. I know you're not from marketing, whatever. Give it a shot and see how they do. And many people say, yeah, I'm happy to try that.
And that's what I really loved about the projects we worked on abroad is they're smaller organizations and you can experiment a little bit and get people doing multiple roles or throw them into something they've never done before, like turning a firefighter into a duty manager and things like that. Those are fun things to watch, right?
Oh yeah.
Now, just on the theme of Vancouver in those early years when you came back as CEO, again, you had inherited a pretty well-run ship, and as you said, winning lots of awards, best in class and all that. But how did you manage to continue anchoring that reputation? And I was always a keen onlooker watching all this, and it looked like you had a hell of a lot of fun along the way too. Like it was, you see a lot of airports where it looks like drudgery, people are just going through the motions, but you guys looked like you had a lot of fun, and I think you had a a few interesting memories from that time, and some of those new airline launches were pretty epic as well. But what are some of the favorites that come to mind?
Well, let me just talk about airline launches. So I learned a lesson because I first got to YVR. It was a heyday, a brand new terminal, and there were 2 or 3 new launches. It seemed like every 3 or 4 months, and you get a bit blasé about them. And oh, go down to the gate and be part of this launch. And I was like, oh, not another one. Then I went for 7 years of I don't think I got a new a new flight ever.
Yeah.
And so when I came back, I said, I am going to try and go on every launch. We tried for 15 years to get Air France, and finally we get Air France. And so I went to Paris on the very first flight. That's fantastic. I was in Toulouse in like 1999 when it was the A3XX. We finally put a pad for the A380, and I got to fly in the very first A380 commercial flight out of Vancouver. So that, these are kind of neat things because you plan for a long time. And I think that was a BA flight around 2016. So that is like, 17 years later, you're on the airplane. One of the funniest ones, and you want to talk about having fun, was we had Hong Kong Airlines launch, and they said they're going to bring Jackie Chan. So you can imagine the comms team comes in and says, "We want you to fight Jackie Chan." And I said, "You what?" But a lot of fun with that video. It really kind of went viral. Me pretending to be ready to fight Jackie Chan, and then one of those moments that happens. He's a force of nature. This guy, he does. People may not. He does Chinese opera. You can buy Jackie Chan pajamas. Like this guy's and so he had bodyguards, and he had a whole retinue. And then I got up in the middle of the night on the way. We met each other. He's pretty funny, and he gave me a lovely book and all kinds of stuff. I got up to have a coffee, whatever. He's standing there and he's editing a film in the galley. And I had a half an hour to talk to Jackie Chan without anybody around. And all of a sudden, then all his people woke up and hustled me away. But, he was a real gentleman and really interesting to just sit and talk to. So, yeah, I mean, when these opportunities come along, you might say, no, I don't want to put myself out there and pretend to be a karate expert against Jackie Chan. Or you could say, I think this could be fun, and that was a good memory.
I remember that video well, and it's well worth seeing. And actually, we'll put a link to it when we put this podcast up because it's well worth a watch. You definitely had some good fun there, and not afraid to put yourself out there and look a little crazy doing it. It was fun. I remember the headband and the whole bit as well. Right?
I remember pulling a muscle doing a high kick, and somebody said, are you actually trained in martial arts? I said, absolutely not. And I limped for about 2 weeks. I always said too, look, you don't want to sound frivolous. I take safety and anything related to safety, passenger safety, regulations extremely seriously. You don't have to take yourself seriously. You show up if you're in a safety role, and when you have to put on your safety hat, you do that. But it doesn't mean you always have to be gruff faced.
Absolutely.
So.
And at the end of the day, as a CEO of an airport, you're like the mayor of a small town or village, and sometimes not so small, 10, 15, 20,000 people. And you've also got to be accessible and humanized as well, right?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Sure. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about your entry into the international business, starting with Nassau, and that was around the same time I left Montego Bay. So I think we probably crossed in the skies somewhere over the Caribbean. So two very different countries, Jamaica and Bahamas, but very similar challenges, I'm sure. You've got to adapt to smaller airport, smaller organization. And I know in the case of Montego Bay, we had to be pretty creative. You talked a little bit earlier about cross-training people, but would imagine you did a fair bit of that and trying to basically optimize people's ambitions and build a team, right? How did you find that in Bahamas?
Well, talk about starting small. The aforementioned Laurie Chambers came into my office once and said, I've been offered a job in the Bahamas. This is in 2006 as the VP of Ops. And I said, well, I hope you're not going there to escape me because I'm going as the CEO. So we ended up going down there, and of course Laurie and my wife and everybody, we became good friends, as you do when you're overseas. But I have a picture of Laurie and I with our one asset, which was a stapler. That's our first corporate asset, was a stapler. So it really was. It was building a company literally from the ground up, taking over from the government, and I would just say overall, the people there were ready to shine. They just hadn't been quite shown the way, and not to disparage the government, but governments have a different mentality, and we just said no. If it's unsafe, don't do it. If it's a safety issue, come and talk to us. If it's customer service, do it. One of my proudest achievements is the not the building, which is gorgeous, in Nassau, that the organization there and the people there are just top notch, and they've kept that whole idea of always excelling and trying to do better and trying to do more with less. We had to repaint the runway markings, and we had no machine. We had no budget for a machine, so the guys did it by hand. Centerline markings on a 7,000-foot runway, and they just rolled it out and did it by hand. Very nice job, and took a while, but boy, I'll talk about attention to detail, and
Exactly.
got it done. So you work with what you have, and just give people room to do the right thing, and they just responded so well, and they've continued to just make that airport an absolute gem.
And you talk about these government-run airports, and it's at the end of the day, governments are good at governing, not necessarily good at operating things, and that's exactly why they privatize. And I remember one of the first team meetings I had in Mobay, and I had 5 different departments. I had ops and fire, security, environment, maintenance. I had like 75% of the organization by headcount, so it was a lot of people. And the first meeting, they're looking at me like, "Okay, boss, what are we going to do?" Like they're waiting for me to tell them how to fix everything. I said, "You know what? You probably already know it needs fixing." And I had my assistant hand out pieces of paper to each one. I said, "I want you to put the 3 things that you wished had been done, that you had asked to be done over the last couple of years, and put them on a piece of paper. And next week we'll come back with our priority." And they all kind of looked at me and they said, "Look, the best ideas on how to improve this place while we're waiting for the new building to be built are coming from you, because you're the experts on this airport. I may be a so-called expert in airports, but you're the expert in this one." And what we ended up doing was taking the common denominators from these 15 or 20 people. They became the top 5 priorities, and it was something as simple as making sure that the toilets worked, right? That we had toilet paper, stuff like that. It was my first KPI was getting a call from a good friend of mine, from one of the hotels, and he was very excited. He said, "Hey, I'm at the airport." And I said, "Yeah, it's kind of echoes." "Yeah, I'm in the toilet." I said, "Why are you calling me?" He said, "Well, there's toilet paper." I said, "What's wrong with the toilet paper?" He says, "No, no, no. I've been coming to this place for 3 years. There's never been toilet paper. You guys are awesome." Right? I'm saying, "Okay, low bar, but thank you." Right?
You know what? It is so funny. I got into a cab once with a guy, a young man, and he said, "Craig, I need to improve my customer service numbers." I said, "Add cleaners in the washrooms." And he said, "That simple?" I said, "That simple." I saw him a year and a half later. He goes, I'm up 3 points on ASQs. Like it's basic, right?
Yeah.
It's basic,
Yeah.
but it is really fundamental. And we
Yeah.
found that there was such a high R squared between the cleanliness of washrooms and how people felt in terms of security at the airport. And I think it comes down to this. Now, this is a supposition on my part, but if you're taking care of the washrooms, you're taking care of everything else. And the opposite is true. If this is not looking good, how is everything else going? So, but I absolutely agree with you. The people there know what to do. One of the issues, and again, I'm not in any way disparaging governments, because they're different. We had an aborted attempt to take over Midway Airport, and I remember talking to the people there. They're part of the city government.
Yeah. Yeah.
The city of Chicago has more firemen and policemen than the Canadian military. And so when they were buying boots, they weren't buying like we would at an airport buy 10 boots. They were buying 25,000 boots. So how fast do you think that procurement process went? I mean, that was one of the issues. The government was so big that the airport was just one department of many, and the 30,000 firefighters and the 25,000 police were vastly, huge. So one of the nice things when you are a small airport and you're just an entity unto yourselves, whatever that is, whatever model that is you can make decisions so fast. Go and buy a drill.
Although when you're working with a small team that's trying to be quick and efficient, you often find that things like specialized fire truck tires end up being tractor tires, and you have to send them back. Yes, they're the right size, but they're
Yeah.
not fit for purpose. So yeah, we learned a few things along the way for sure. We usually like to talk at this point about a few crazy stories, and in airports, it seems to be a place that we attract them. So you must have some pretty good ones from your various stops along the way. But what are the couple of craziest ones that you've ever come across in your airport career?
There's crazy good and crazy bad.
We take both.
Yeah, well, here's a little known fact about 9/11 in North America. That day, I think it was a Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, was ACI in Montreal. So all the CEOs of all the airports in North America, of NAV Canada, FAA, senior government, everybody was in Montreal. So it was run by guys like me and that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, it was surreal in that suddenly, the head of transport locally says the U.S. is shutting their airspace. And can you take 34 jumbos? Yes. And now to have 8,500 people sitting on your airport going, what am I doing in Vancouver? That was bizarre, funny. You go, okay, this is odd. I'm doing some consulting work in the Middle East in the middle of Ramadan, and we had a finance meeting start at 9:30 at night and end at 2 in the morning, and then we had a banquet. And I'm stuffed full of amazing good iftar food at 4 in the morning going, okay, this one goes in the books. That's I've pulled all-nighters before, but rarely having a banquet. And then there's the great customer service stories, that you just go, again, when you have people like this, you can't lose. One of our security people comes upon a woman crying in the terminal, says, can I help you? She says, I was nervous, me and my husband, he's coming back home. I was cleaning my wedding ring. Before you know it, I lost it somewhere out in the parking lot. And the guy said, do you know where you were? No. He said, tell me,
no.
This is a 3,000 stall parking lot in the dark.
Yeah.
He said, can you tell me anything you remember? And so he kind of tried to pinpoint where it might have been, spent 3 hours and found her wedding ring. It just runs the gamut, doesn't it? And I used to enjoy reading the ops logs, because it must be what it's like for police, because they would take this huge drama and just put it down to one sentence. You'd go, 6.5 foot tall, very angry man brandishing sword at screening point. There's a story there. There's a screenplay, but it's all in one line, and
it's very concise.
I often said I should have taken a picture of the strangest ones, everything from life and death in between. And that's, I think that's part of the reason that people sort of get hooked on airports, because even though every airport has a terminal and a runway, and has people coming to it, that's about where the similarities end. And every day can be very, very different. And you have no idea that you'd be dealing with this crisis or that crisis. And some people like that, some people don't. I think it gets in some airport operators' blood. You ride to the sound of the guns, right? You hear, hey, what's that? That's something odd is going on, and you want to be part of it. You want to fix it. And I think that's the addictive part of it. Because when I first started, I thought it was a 6-month gig. Back in 1995, it was a 6-month consulting gig, and I never left airports. I still haven't. So.
Yeah, and you also find that some of the people that are working at airports that go off onto consulting end up coming back because they miss the sort of random lack of structure, right? And every day is a new day. You never know what's coming down the pipe, right?
Yeah, guilty as charged. I was 18 months into retirement, and I get a call. You want to be on the board of the Calgary Airport Authority? And I said, you know what? Sure.
Sounds good.
He was the CEO, and it's turned out to be incredibly interesting from the other side.
Yeah, and actually, just jumping back to 9/11, I was part of that story to a certain extent as well, because I got the call after you saying there's 35 airplanes coming in from Asia. If anything happens at Vancouver, basically, I think the words were, if Craig screws it up, they need to come to your airport. So I knew you weren't going to screw it up, but I made sure that we could find some way. And my ops manager, a guy named Mike Pastro, he'd been working Abbotsford for 25 years at that time, and he knew every square inch of pavement on that airport, thanks to air show and everything else. And yeah, we had a plan for 35 jumbos coming in. We got one German business jet, but it was quite an exercise. And yeah, we were your backup plan, but it was.
Well, you know what? This comes back to that planning thing I said. I was up to my butt in everything going on. And I just threw a piece of paper at Brett Patterson, and I said, figure out how to park 34 airplanes. Now, keep in mind, we had 110 airplanes on the ground already. All the Canadian, every gate, everything, every parking spot. So he basically took the plan for an extreme snow event, and we shut down the North Runway and the Crosswind Runway and just parked all these jumbos nose to tail. You've seen the pictures of Halifax and Vancouver, but so we didn't have a plan for this, but you adopt another plan and it works. And like you said, the air show, you had enough airplanes at Abbotsford with the air show to know how to park.
It was 10 or 15 seconds away from stepping on a bus at Vancouver South Terminal to go down for some sort of tour of Boeing Field that day. There was a big junket with BCAC, the Aviation Council.
Yeah.
And I just, I didn't have all the details yet, but I'm like, you know what? I need to get back. I need to get back to the office. So I turned around, got back in my car and drove to Abbotsford and well, the rest is history. But yeah, it was one of those days none of us will ever forget, right?
I've often said in the people at the airports were lucky in one regard because I didn't even see any of the videos till the end of the day, and we had something to do. We had to get ready. We had people to look after, whereas the rest of the world was just standing there watching, and that's horrifying. So we were lucky in that we were busy and that we hadn't lost anybody, of course, and that was tough. I went out to talk to the airlines. There were a bunch of people there from American Airlines, and they
Mhm.
didn't know why they'd been diverted. This is prior to when they had the little
Mhm.
machines that would send teletypes into the cockpit, and the guys got it,
That's it.
and they weren't picking anything up enough on AM radio, and they didn't knew something had happened, but they didn't know it was their airplane. So that was emotional to get on the headset and tell them.
And to not know how deep this was going. Was it just the four airplanes? Was it more than that? Like how how
Yeah,
extensive was the plot, right?
yeah.
And it's easy to go back now and say, well, we knew it was four airplanes, but in the first 24 hours or the first 4 hours, we had no idea, right?
It was
So.
yeah, like I said, life changing, but glad to have been there. Glad to have helped in some
Mhm.
small way.
Well, moving on to happier times, I guess we call it. But you spent some time in the UK heading up Peel airports, and that's a group of airports, including Liverpool. But again, quite a contrast from Canada and the Caribbean, and it gives interesting aspects in everything. But must have been some unique and interesting challenges there. Both, I would say, both personally and professionally, must have been quite an interesting experience, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, when you work with good people and people that are resilient, it makes all the difference. It was tough times. Literally, almost the day I got there, Northern England went into recession. So it was tough. It was also my first real exposure to working with ultra low cost airlines, Ryanair, EasyJet, Wizz Air.
And
But
that's a joy unto itself, right?
sure, different, very, very different. Liverpudlians, lovely people. I mean, really amazing. And I loved the fact that I basically went from coast to coast. I had Liverpool, and then in the middle in Yorkshire, Doncaster, and Little Durham up south of Newcastle. And again, the people that run those airports, fantastic, can-do attitude, even in the face of decreasing numbers, which is what it was. And so that's kind of what was embedded into my personality. Ever get another flight, I'm getting on that flight. So when I got back to
Yeah.
Vancouver, I think I only missed a couple. The one thing that you do need to do if you're going to those of you who are going to go to Liverpool is you had better be a Liverpool fan. I remember somebody asked me, "Are you a Liverpool or Everton fan?" And I said, "How many fans in this city are Liverpool? 600,000. How many are Everton? 120. Liverpool."
Go by the averages, right? So,
Yeah.
well, we've got the whole football world descending on us here in a couple of weeks in Vancouver and Toronto, and well, up and down all of the major cities in North America. But I do think I'm not sure everybody quite appreciates what's coming. It's spread out over three countries and 10 or 12 locations, but we had the great privilege of managing all that general aviation and business traffic in Qatar 4 years ago. And there's two airports side by side, but it's a tiny country, right? So everybody's coming
Yep.
into those two airports either as a civilian or coming in as a private aircraft. And I think we handled it was our good friend Jennifer Dandy that we had
Mm,
managing that because of her experience with the Olympics in
right.
Vancouver back in 2010, where she did roughly the same job. And actually, Fernando, our partner in London, was involved in the 2012 Olympics as well. But she said, over 300 aircraft showing up, private aircraft for a particular match, and you never know. It's like rolling dice as to who advances and who's going to show up on the day. But
Yep.
when the Saudis won that match against, was it Argentina? Yeah, it was, right. They almost, the place almost went crazy. But then the next match for Saudi, everybody was on their airplane from Riyadh, and we had
Mm.
like wide bodies with six people getting off, but yeah, 300 airplanes to handle in a couple hours. And I hope that all the host cities in North America understand that, depending on who advances and how this all works out, they're going to have the world at their doorstep, and you better have lots of capacity and be able to deal with contingencies because it's a challenge for sure.
Whole new definition of peaks.
Yeah.
these kind of events, but also an opportunity to shine, and I think what has done Vancouver very well over the years, things like Expo 86, where the whole world came and said, hey, this is neat. The Olympics in 2010. Never forget some of the pictures. I was overseas at the time in the Bahamas, but seeing the pictures, going out all over the world of Vancouver, I mean, that does not hurt your tourism at all. I hope everybody's ready for it. Be over prepared because, as you said, as these matches progress, there will be winners and there'll be losers, and all of a sudden, everybody from the winning country is going to want to get there. Now, a little bit different, coming all the way to North America, but still peaks like you've never seen.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about profiling the city. You think about Vancouver, Expo 86, then reversion of Hong Kong in 97, then the Olympics in 2010, and now here we are 16 years later. 16 years later, this periodic worldwide exposure, it really has done a lot to give the city profile. It also means our real estate's a little pricey, but you got to take the good
There
with
is
the
that.
bad. So, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So we were talking very briefly about Cyprus, but you and I actually share a pin in that map, as we talked about. It was a short gig because that's where you got the call to return back to Vancouver, but you had a chance to get a bit of a taste of things in Cyprus, and I really enjoyed my time there. But it wasn't just the work; it was the history of the place. Like, it's got thousands of years of history layered on top of it. Did you get a chance to experience much of that?
A little bit. I was only there for 6 months. It was bittersweet, because I really liked the place. I love the people, the history. Not to mention Cyprus is so uniquely located. My wife and I managed to grab an Emirates flight to Malta, and Malta is one of those places sort of hard to get to, but we had a great time there. And of course, as you say, I mean, the history goes back, I don't know, 8,000 to 9,000 years, and the Roman ruins, everything. We really loved it, and the people were exceptionally welcoming and lovely, and frankly, the food, still the best grilled meats in the entire world are in
Yeah.
Cyprus. I'm sorry for anybody here who objects to that, but you can have anything that's perfectly done, and you can have a salad, and you can have a glass of wine, and it'll cost you like €9. And boy, I miss that.
Yeah, and did you learn the hard way to pace yourself at a meze? Like, nobody tells you
Yeah,
that there's an
no.
endless plate of small food coming, that you better save yourself, right?
Yeah, it's like going to a banquet in Japan, and you get a little tiny bowl of rice. You go, I'm going to starve. And 26 dishes later, you go, oh my God, my
Yeah,
stomach's
yeah.
expanding. But I was there for, I'll probably mispronounce this, for Sinopemte, I think it is. And the IT guys at Cyprus had this huge barbecue. They were roasting all the chicken and the lamb and the beef, and it was wafting into the building. And I think they did it on purpose, because all the windows were open, and then the thing kept coming out. It'll be 15 more minutes, 10 more minutes, 20 more minutes, and people are, give me that food.
And there's these homemade barbecues. They're made out of checker plate, and they've got rotisserie, and they hook them up to a battery, and it's like a whole production. And I brought one back, and every once in a while, you'll take it out to the beach, and people are walking by like, "Where do I buy that?" Well, hop on an airplane and you can go down a back alley in
I,
Larnaca. So,
yeah,
but
I know a guy in
yeah.
Paphos. Yeah.
The other thing I do recall quite vividly is arriving there. I'd left Jamaica on a Friday with my wife, and the dog was meant to come with us, but she couldn't get on the airplane due to paperwork. She came about a week later, but we arrive, and 10 days later we take over two airports. And 3 weeks later, I get this weird call from the station manager of Middle East Airlines. He was my neighbor. Got to know him early on, and his name is Nabil. He calls me and says, "Do you have room to park an A330 and three A321s?" And I said, "Yeah, I can talk to Miltos, our guy, my ops guy, but what's going on?" He goes, "Well, I can't tell you, but check the news in the morning and you'll understand." So I call Miltos. I tell him the same thing. He asks the same questions, why and for how long. And I said, "Well, this is what he told me. Check your news in the morning." I checked the news in the morning, and Israel has bombed Lebanon. It was the start of the war in 2006, right?
Uh,
So I call him. I said, "Nabil, okay, now I understand why we parked these airplanes, but you're the station manager of Middle East Airlines, owned by Beirut and by Lebanon. How did you get a heads up that there was going to be military action the next day?" He says, "Very simple, my friend. Our airplanes are insured by an Israeli insurer."
uh,
Yeah, it's interesting. You get a better appreciation for how the world works when you're out and about and doing things that you never thought you'd be doing when you're working in places like Abbotsford or Nanaimo, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
And I would say to any young person listening to this, if you get an opportunity to work overseas, if you can all swing it, do it. When you come back to your original country, and it may not come back as a CEO, but you may come to a different airport, whatever.
mhm.
But getting that perspective, that international perspective, even understanding different accounting rules, understanding the different IASA versus FAA versus Transport Canada versus Ministry of Transport in the UK. Every time is a little bit different, and it just helps expand your knowledge base, and it's fun. Let's face it, it's fun to live overseas.
Well, you get to experience the places, the people, not as a tourist. And the three tours abroad that we did together over that 8.5 years, so those are the most challenging, but the most rewarding times in our life. And the people that you meet, like it's like casting seeds in the wind. That now anybody that was working in those three projects is living somewhere else, working somewhere else, and so almost everywhere we travel, and I'm sure you find the same, you end up knowing somebody somewhere, and then that echo is there because then you're getting to experience another place through the eyes of the friends that are living there now. So it's not easy, it's not for everybody, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I think it's career making, and it gives you a sense of resilience. That if you only stayed at the same place, at the same airport, you wouldn't. Doesn't mean you're not resilient, but you wouldn't have the same sense of okay, I can do this. I can do almost anything because I've seen some pretty crazy stuff.
And there's the resilience part, but there's also the appreciating your country as well. Like I came back much more appreciative of being a red-blooded Canadian. But we also won't complain about the first world problems that we have. Like I'll never complain about a pothole or the police didn't come in 30 seconds or I lost my cable or my internet for 30 minutes. You learn how to adapt, and you see
Yeah.
people, Jamaicans are better at responding to a hurricane than anybody I've ever seen because they've lived through not just hurricanes, but just a normal
Everything.
course of the day, losing
Yeah.
water, losing power, and you adapt and you learn that resilience and sort of day-to-day living as well. So.
Yep.
So we're getting close to the end here, and I was interested to hear your view, getting a little extraterrestrial at the end. You're an ex-Canadian Air Force pilot, and lots of interest in military and space. But I thought you might have some thoughts on this Artemis II mission and what you think it means. It's been 50 years since we've been back there, but be kind of interested to hear what you have to say.
Oh, just fascinating. There was an amazing graphic put out. It showed the trajectory of how to go to the moon. It's not like driving, in a straight line. These bodies are orbiting around each other, and it's a bunch of loops as these things are happening. As Gretzky said, you don't go to where the puck is, you go to where it's going to be. If the
Yeah,
moon's
exactly.
over there, you fire yourself over there so you can intercept it. So the math is incredible. The celestial mechanics. I would say this. I mean, it really gives you an appreciation for the Apollo missions that did it with like 8 kilobit computers, and without a lot of backup compared to what they have now.
Our cell phones have
Oh yeah,
more computing power than whatever they had on those moon landers. It's insane, right?
yeah. So we have a lot higher technology, but still, you're a long ways from home. You're 250,000 miles from home. There's no hope of rescue at this point if something screws up. So a lot of respect for the astronauts, and of course, the whole point of this is to actually establish a base on the moon, which would be amazing, and about 50 years late compared to what I thought it would be. But I think it'll happen, and it'll happen with any luck in our lifetime. I think obviously that's what they were doing. They're getting ready, to do that. And anyway, shout out to our Canadian
So
F-18 pilot that was on that mission. So pretty cool.
yeah, he's done us all proud. And if you get a chance, and anybody that's listening and you're interested in space, there's a series called For All Mankind, and it
Oh yeah,
starts in the it
love it.
starts in the 60s, and the premise is effectively, what if the space race had never ended and it kept on going? And things would look very differently. And it tracks some of the history, but then it diverts, and it's really worth a listen. So I'd encourage everybody to you got to invest a few months of your time to get through it all, but it's good stuff. Okay, we're now down to the final segment, Craig, and this is what we call the magic mirror. It's peering into the heart of your being, for lack of a better word. It's 15 very carefully selected scientific, pseudoscientific questions. Start with one that especially for you, I'd love to hear the answer. Favorite aircraft, civilian or military, current or historical?
Well, aircraft is a plural, so I would say personally, although the F-18 was amazing, and I love the F-18. Hemingway said, you can only lose your heart once to an airplane, and it was a starfighter. So it was the F-104. I flew. It was one of the last courses on the Canadian F-104, second last. And when you lose your heart to an airplane like that, it was amazing for its day. The F-18 was amazing historically, and again as a fighter pilot, the Hawker Hurricane. The Spitfire, Supermarine Spitfire gets all the glory, but the Hawker Hurricane was there in numbers when it was needed, and I've always wanted to fly that airplane. So there's three.
Well, I'll give you my three: the Mustang, the Spitfire, and I never got to ride on the Concorde. So
Yeah. I had a ticket once and it got yanked, and I got put on the 747, and I was pretty disappointed.
Okay. Well, I hope we live to see the moon base, and I also hope to see the return of supersonic commercial flight again. But let's see, right? Lots of advances and all that. So all we can do is be hopeful. So how about apples or oranges?
Oranges.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
And flat or sparkling?
Flat.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the Europeans didn't have too much influence on you. That's good.
No.
Preference, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
100%. Scariest animal?
Polar bear.
And for good reason, especially when they're hungry. Favorite classic car?
Aston Martin.
Yes. Particular model or just in general?
James Bond.
Of course, of course.
I don't know what the model number is, but I want the ejector seat.
Yeah. Here's a good one. Famous person, living or dead, you'd like to have dinner with?
Oh, that's a good one. Jacqueline Cochran. A lot of people don't know of her. Female test pilot, should have been an astronaut, but just wasn't possible due to the time she was living in. But I've always thought she would have been a fascinating person to talk to.
Well, I think they might have used her in that program where they were training female astronauts back in the 60s in this For All Mankind, because they in the series they do send them and it changes everything, right? So I won't give away the rest of that plot. How about greatest fear?
Oh, that's a good one. I fear the voice in me that sometimes counsels surrender. That sometimes that little voice says, "No, you can't do this, give up." That's I don't want to, but every once in a while, everybody has that little voice saying, you should back off, shouldn't do that. So that's probably it. I'm not really afraid of any. I have a healthy respect for rattlesnakes, bears, where I live on a mountain in a Soyuz. I have a healthy respect for them, but I'm not afraid of them, and I don't get icked out by spiders. I would say the closest thing, maybe you've been in the tropics, centipedes. Not my favorite.
Oh yeah. They call them 40-leggers in Jamaica, crimson red, and oh man. So yeah. But that little voice you were talking about, the problem is it gets louder as you get older too, right? But
well, that's because you get smarter, right?
Yeah, you start to learn a few things along the way. Thank God.
You can't do this, old man. Oh yeah?
Okay.
No, that's always a dangerous combination when you're skiing or something.
Yeah, for sure. Favorite dessert?
Oh, I certainly do like a good rum cake. That would be a Bahamian thing, but also key lime pie.
Oh yes, two very good choices. I'll take you up on the next dinner together. Earliest memory?
Oh, that's a good one. Whew. You mean today or in general?
I think in general was the intent. Right?
This is going to sound funny or odd, I guess, given that I love dogs, but I do have a memory of a dog biting me when I was about 4. So there you go.
Well, that would stick in your mind.
You can get past
sure.
these things.
Absolutely.
Get past things.
Absolutely. Most used app on your phone, excluding WhatsApp or Outlook?
It's a weather app called Windy, and I find it's really good. It combines a lot of things, and because I live not in a town, I live up on a mountain. It combines a lot of different things to give you a really good forecast, which is not easy to forecast weather. I'm at like 1,200 meters, so
Yeah.
people around here say, "Hey, it's foggy." I'm going, "That's not fog, that's cloud." So
In the clouds, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, there's another one that I've been using a fair bit. It's a star tracker map, and there's
Mm.
a couple different ones
Oh,
out there, but yeah, they're really
cool.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should see the stars up here at 1,200 meters with
Oh, I'm
no
sure.
light noise, from the city,
Mhm.
and on a clear night. It is. I've never seen the Milky Way like this.
Absolutely. No, it's when you get away from the city and all that light pollution, it's got to be amazing. So, favorite movie of all time?
Blade Runner.
That's come up before with one of my other guests, and it's one of the ones my wife and I. It's something we go back to every 3 or 4 years. It's brilliant and it's really well done.
And the sequel was really good. That you worry about sequels, and just like Dune 1 and 2, I was not disappointed. I was not disappointed by the Blade Runner sequel, and hats off to Ryan Gosling. You did a great job.
Now, here's the difficult one. You get one song to listen to for the rest of your life. What is it?
Probably it's got to be classical, but I would say a new classic would be Rhapsody in Blue by Gershwin.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, that would work. Now, the impossible question. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100, and it has some relevance to what we talked about today.
Oh boy. 6.
Oh, you were so close. It was
Oh,
7
oh,
because you had 2 runs in and out of Vancouver of 7 years, right?
oh, there you go. I was thinking of you
Yeah,
and I both had it off in '06. You to
yeah. Well,
Cyprus
that was a
or
good
you to
guess as well,
Jamaica. Yeah.
but yeah, a couple people have guessed it right so far. Elizabeth Brown being the first. She guessed 67 because that happens to be the same year we were both born. So that was a pretty good shot in the dark.
Well, you know what? I'll have to give her a heck about it next time I see her. Thanks for making me look bad.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, second to last question. Favorite place you've ever visited and the top bucket list destination you'd like to see?
I'll do the bucket list first. Wendy and I are going to go to Japan for a good long holiday. I've been there many times on business, but not enough time to really enjoy it. And so probably going to do a 3-week. My brother and my son ski up in Hokkaido. You've never seen snow like that. I've never seen snow like that. So
Nice.
I'm really keen to explore Japan. So many favorite places, and it's like saying a favorite food because it's so good. But I have to say one of the most stunningly beautiful places I've ever been. It's like Okanagan Lake, for those of you who understand Canada, but in Italy, Lake Como.
Ah,
Lake Como
yes.
is just gorgeous. I was there with 7 other people. We were renting a villa, and we get up in the morning with a coffee, sitting about 100 meters up from the water, and everybody sit there with a coffee, and nobody would say anything, just staring
Mhm.
at this beautiful lake with
Yeah,
the villas and the little, the little villages dotted along the lake and the Alps in the background. Oh man, it's just literally you can see why for thousands of years the Roman emperors would go there just to chill out.
literally awestruck, right?
Yeah.
I have not made it there, but that should be on the list. Although Hokkaido, we'll be heading there in October for GAD Asia. So
Oh, fantastic.
let's meet up in Hokkaido.
Okay.
So, final question, your personal mantra in 10 words or less.
L'audace, l'audace, toujours l'audace. Audacity, audacity, always audacity. I think that was Charlemagne's motto.
Okay, well, I do not have that history committed to memory, but I'll take your word for it. But it's, you need a good dose of that to get through life. So I think it served you well.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do if you don't hold yourself back and you're not looking to take the credit. And
Yeah.
that's it's been an amazing career, and it's not over. I'm still enjoying doing all kinds of work. And the nice thing about when you get to be my age is you can pick and choose. So for those of you starting out in aviation, there are tough times, and we've all gone through them. But what an amazing career, for a skinny kid from Kamloops. Look that up on a map for those of you who are
Yeah, yeah,
overseas.
yeah. Yeah,
to have done the
exactly.
things that I've done. I feel
Yeah.
pretty privileged and lucky and proud. Luck's part of it. You got to have good luck. But when somebody comes to you and you already have a fantastic job, some might say the best VP job in the world, and somebody says, "You want to go to the Bahamas and start up a company and build a terminal?" Yeah,
Yeah,
go.
sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, when the audience is looking up where Kamloops is, which is maybe the size of a silver dollar, I'll ask them to look for Vivank, Saskatchewan, which is the size of a penny. It's a tiny little place in southern Saskatchewan. But yeah, it's like sometimes you pinch yourself, like, how did you end up here from some farm kid in Saskatchewan? Well, you just take one step at a time, and you don't know what you don't know, so you just keep on going, right?
yeah,
So.
exactly.
Well, Craig, it's been a pleasure. Great catching up with you here, and I'm sure we'll catch up live soon enough somewhere, but it remains to be seen exactly where, but I look forward to it.
You bet. Great talking to you. Thanks, and look forward to all of these. It's great listening to people. I'm glad that you're doing this. So
Appreciate it, and it's really been a joy. So we'll keep it coming.
you bet. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us on Open Mic. If today's conversation sparked ideas or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Visit airportir.com/open mic to listen to more episodes, connect with our team, and stay informed about the global aviation developments that matter to you.